everybody, and welcome to Drive To Win here from the SiriusXM studios at the beautiful Wynn Las Vegas. I'm Justin Bell, I'm your host once again, and I got a great guest this week, fresh from the forest in Italy at Monza, is Massimo Delbo. He's a prominent journalist, and as he was there, and obviously being Italian, if you cut him in half, it's not just normal red, it's Ferrari red. So I think he's going to be a great guest, and I want to dig into everything with him. But Monza, the Temple of Speed, I think I've said before on the show, I went there as a kid a couple of times with my dad to watch him race. And I remember walking up on the old banking and just being mesmerized by the fact that this is where Ascari and Fangio and Moss all drove up on the banking in those cars with those narrow wheels at crazy speeds with no seatbelts and leather helmets and just titanium attachments, really, to make them be able to do that. I mean, you used to race at Monza and know that someone was not going to go home that night. I mean, back in the day, sadly, tens of drivers perished there and their names lost to history. In fact, they never even made the history books. Gentlemen racers, as was the de facto type of person that could afford to go racing at the time. But also Jochen Rindt and Ronnie Peterson perished at Monza back in the day, two of the finest guys ever to drive a Formula One car. So it claimed some victims in a very harsh way, which is why it is such a fabulous place to go racing, because in an era where we have these very synthetic, almost antiseptic style racing tracks where you can spin at 200 miles an hour and not hit anything, there's a feeling of being in this gladiatorial environment and the spirits of the drivers all around you. Temple of Speed, actually, since 1921, 95 Grand Prix held there. It's definitely a place that if you can get your name on the trophy, you know you have cemented your place in Formula One history books. Why do we like watching Formula One at Monza? I mean, I think for all the things we said, but it's also got this magic. It's so accessible. And as we saw, you know, from the way the race went, it was fast, it incredibly high speeds achieved, and a very simple track, not complicated. Even as you watch the onboards, you go, well, that was kind of it. But when you put it all together, it makes for some incredible racing. And it made for literally, they call it the Temple of Speed, it was a showcase of speed, wasn't it? Max recorded the fastest ever race lap in Formula One history. The race was the fastest race in F1 history. I mean, Max was at 155.79 miles an hour, and the race was in 1 hour and 13 minutes and change, which shows how incredibly quick it was with not one yellow. I before we kind of get going, I do want to mention how qualifying went, because like you, probably, I sit at home and I know you don't fast forward through qualifying because you're trying to ingest as much as you can. But those last 3 to 4 minutes of each session are so engaging and enthralling. And then the last one of Q3, just to see, especially now, the stakes are so high, especially between the McLaren drivers. I thought it was absolutely spectacular. And when Max did that final pole qualifying lap, I mean, Lando had it for a moment and I cheered inside, and then Max did it and I also cheered. But his 5th pole of the year, and just, I think it set the scene, didn't it? I mean, then of course he went on, got a 20-second lead by the end of the race and won, and his 3rd win of the year, 66th win of his career. And it really, for me, reminded me of exactly what he is in our modern era. He really is the total representation of dedication and pure speed, application. And, you know, in the same way that I guess like a Mike Tyson was born to fight, and a Tiger Woods was probably, you know, developed to be such an amazing golfer, Max was raised to be this unapologetic winner. And yet you have to also measure a driver or measure any athlete by how they respond to adversity. And the last 18 months has been pretty wildly crappy in the world of Red Bull racing. I mean, yes, they've won races and things, but it's been tumultuous, hasn't it, in their camp? You had the Christian Horner sexting scandal, and then Adrian Newey leaving, and then, you know, teammates that just came and went and dismally let him down in the supporting role that they're supposed to play. Then you had Horner being fired. And all those rumors about will Max switch teams and will he jump? And none of that is conducive to keeping your head down and achieving the goal in hand. And while everybody else might have been taking their eye off the ball, he really didn't. And a lot was talked about this weekend of his ability to make a shift within the team. Lauren Meck has obviously done that as the new team principal. And he dug in deep and they worked out a new philosophy. And I was a bit surprised to hear that they didn't listen to his input as much as he might have wanted, especially in the aero department. But now he's really imposing his will and what the driver wants from the car at the end in a way to be able to drive it at this extraordinary level is what they've been able to achieve. And I think they're merging the world of simulation. That's what apparently they're talking about. They have so much data, and these engineers and all these MBAs and PhDs are coming up with how the car should be to drive. And Max is pushing back, saying, this is how I need it to drive. And I think that mixing in the middle is absolutely correct. And obviously since Zandvoort, it's been right. I mean, I think another reflection of that is how well Yuki's running. And Yuki is, I mean, you could say, obviously he's not up there, but he was just on the edge of the point. He was in the points. And if you think of where he was a few races ago, it's obviously better to drive now. And that has to be the thing they're working out, because you can't just rely, and I know I said it last week, Max must be getting a bit peed off with the fact that they're relying on his extraordinary brilliance to carry the car at the end. Why not make it a little bit more compliant, make it easier to drive, make it have a wider operating range? And I think they're getting that. And he's now in a car that can win races, and he believes it's going to be better in slow speeds as well, which is pretty cool. He's obviously not going to win the Drivers' Championship, and yet the most important role he plays is in being the disruptor. And I think if there's a driver on the grid that will enjoy that, that is Max Verstappen. He can win races, which is one thing, but taking the points from whom to do so. Each time he does that, who will be finishing second, who will be finishing third? Maybe more importantly, if a Lando wins or an Oscar wins and he finishes second, that point spread is going to start having some savage consequences. And he won't give a damn. He will just enjoy every moment. I know he's friends with Lando, but he isn't bound by the Papaya Rules. And so I think that's going to be one of the most exciting elements to the end of the season. Just look, he was laughing when he saw what they were doing at the end of the race when they switched around. I just had this visual at the time of a panther, big panther prowling while the two cubs are playing. We shall see the role he has yet to play. Well, of course, let's cut to McLaren. And I've got this visual of the debrief room. I think I mentioned it on social media. He gets pole. And, they must sit there in the debriefing room and they're going, but on paper, we know we have the fastest car. What the heck? How did he get pole position? And they must all be staring at each other going, well, you two are behind the wheel. What more can we do? And, of course, then Lando lines up next to Max on the grid with his championship rival behind Max, which I thought was a very advantageous place actually for Oscar. And there's only one way for them to go. Lando has to win. So I think the psychology for Lando may be almost a little more liberating with that bit of a point spread between him and Oscar. For Oscar, do you really see him contracting as a driver? Do you really see him tightening up? Because that can happen when you have a lead. It's easier to be the aggressor and the chaser than it is to be the guy out front. I just don't see Oscar in that sort of psychological space, but who knows? I mean, this weekend, the Papaya twins were crushed by Max. And again, I cut to the debrief room after the race when they're going, you too? I mean, it's one guy in one car, and he has no strategic options other than to blast you two into second and third place. And he did it. And so I think it really does make everybody involved appreciate that the X factor here is the Max factor. I can't wait to discuss this actually a little bit later with Massimo. let's quickly talk about the switcheroo that they had to do. I like David Coulter. I didn't like the call at all. I understand Oscar going, well, that's just a bad pit stop. But I do want to bring something up. If it was IndyCar, I was talking with Sam Schmidt at lunch yesterday, who, big IndyCar ex-driver and team owner. He said that obviously in IndyCar, you'd have one driver's side of the garage do their pit stop and another their own pit team do the other driver's stop. In Formula One, it's the same set of guys. So it is really an equitable situation. There is no advantage to either of them to outperform each other. But if Lando overshot the pit box, as he said, it would have been his fault. But this wasn't his fault. But where do you draw the line, guys? What if you're out on track, someone spins, you go wide, get on the grass, go in the gravel. They put gravel on the track and you spin. That's a force majeure as well. That's part of racing. So I think they're setting themselves up for some very controversial moments later in the year because it's equitable now, but will it feel so equitable when you're down to 2 or 3 points? And I believe Lando's going to close that gap really quite aggressively over the next few races. And Andrea Stella did do a good defense of it, but I don't know. We'll have to see. The jury's out. And in the end, the record books don't say, you were such a nice guy, you helped your teammate to win a world championship. It's just about the guy who won. And, would an Ayrton Senna or Michael Schumacher do that? No. I love the harmony of McLaren and their spirit of their joie de vivre or whatever of racing. But it's rather like two guys chasing after a hot date. It ends in tears, and there are no ménage à trois in Formula One, unfortunately. There isn't a trophy for that. Anyway, let's keep the racing on track and not off it. We have 8 races to go after all. Revelry returns to Wynn Las Vegas later this month on September 19th through the 27th. Truly a once-in-a-lifetime culinary celebration. Experience pop-up tastings and masterclasses, chef collaborations, and The Feast, which is a grand tasting event across 5 distinct culinary worlds. From world-class chefs to elite vintners and mixologists, this is a culinary experience unlike any other. For more information, please visit LasVegasRevelry.com. That's LasVegasRevelry.com. Well, I was going to talk about Ferrari right now, but there is no point because my guest embodies the world of Ferrari. So let's ask him all about it. Massimo Delbo. He's a prominent Italian classic car journalist. I see him all over the world at the big car events like Pebble Beach, Concours, d'Elegance. He really is an expert on vintage automobiles, especially Ferrari. He's written books on the subject. He also serves as the editorial director on Cavallino Magazine, which is based in Palm Beach, Florida. I used to do quite a few things for them and go to their event. It's one of the top events and an amazing magazine, all dedicated Ferrari. He also, to Ferrari, he judges at Villa d'Este and at Pebble Beach, and he is a passionate Italian when it comes to the world of cars and racing. So, Massimo, nice to see you and welcome to the show. It's been quite a while since I saw you, maybe a month. Yeah, normally I'm used to seeing you at Pebble Beach, Concours d'Elegance, or Amelia Island, or all these events that are about the past of the automobile. But today we're going to talk about Formula One, so I'm excited about that. But yeah, so how have you been?
Oh, yes, wonderful. Thank you. It's an amazing scenario talking about Formula One, because when I was very young, that was my dream to be a race car driver. And of course, winning Monza, Monte Carlo with Ferrari. That was the number one dream. And of course, I ran out of money immediately, but I feel that my talent ran off well before still. So there was no way for me. So I went on the other side, telling the story of the old racers and discovering that they were amazing guys, really.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because last night I ate with a friend in the Italian restaurant here at the Wynn. And the maitre d' is Italian, and he knows I have the show. And he said, being a Ferrari fan it's like supporting a soccer team that never wins. He said, it breaks my heart. He said, being Italian is hard work. And this weekend, well, was it that bad for Ferrari? I don't know. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Massimo, you were there. talk about the emotion of it. Talk about the tifosi and the atmosphere.
So I grew up in Milano, and that was about, let's say, 40 minutes by moped when I was a teenager. So when I had, when there was something interesting in Monza, usually my desk at school remained empty, and I was escaping to go to Monza. So for me, Monza is a sort of second home since many years. But of course, it's always a special place because the passion that you have in Monza, and doesn't matter how competitive is the Ferrari there. The passion that you feel, that you breathe there is something special that you don't have anywhere else in the world, honestly. So it's a really a magic place, doesn't matter what. Try to imagine when you have the Formula One Grand Prix and, everybody was there. And of course, everybody in the deep of his heart was dreaming of a decent result for Ferrari. Because, your friend was wrong in saying that being a Ferrari tifosi means that you support a team that never wins.
Yeah.
It's still worse because, you get used to win and then suddenly you find yourself in 10, 15, 20 years of not winning. So it's still worse because you know how are your feelings when you're winning. So you miss that.
Yeah. Were you in Milano on Wednesday when Lewis and Charles were in the square?
No.
No,
I would have loved to be in Duomo Square with looking at them, but sometimes I have to work.
Yeah.
So today I cannot escape from my desk as when I was at school. So I wasn't there.
But I think it was true, right? All the reports that Lewis was overwhelmed by seeing the fan reaction. It was something he's waited for to experience all year, and there he is. He's surrounded by them. And what is their attitude to him? It must have been incredible. What's the emotion of the tifosi for Lewis?
Lewis Hamilton is a great race car driver, and he proved during his amazing career how good he is. And I always remember that even when he was racing and winning for Mercedes, he was always saying, a race car driver career is not complete until he doesn't race with Ferrari. And I do remember a couple of times after he won Monza, and of course he won with the Mercedes, he was getting applauses, but he was saying, "Oh, how much I would love to win here with this support coming to me." And when last year Leclerc won, and there was this amazing number of people with the flags under the podium, just filling up the whole straight that is 3 kilometers long, was such an amazing scenery that for sure he was hoping for something like that. But you are never ready to get to something like that until you feel it yourself on your skin. And I think that what he saw and what he felt in Milano, in Piazza Duomo, was an amazing warm cuddle from all the tifosi. Because, amazingly, even if Ferrari is not winning in this moment, nobody is accusing the driver because of that. We are all the tifosi are very well aware that the results are not coming, but it's not their fault. Leclerc and Hamilton, they already both prove how good they are. And so I don't think that they stop to be good racer just because they are 6 months older. It's simply because they have problem that they are not able of solving, and probably is not them. Their duty should be the engineer duty to help the car to get better. But I think that Hamilton was absolutely stunned by what he saw in Milano and what he felt in Milano.
Yeah, because it is legendary, the Ferrari media, when they turn against the team or the team manager or the drivers. So I know it's a very dynamic relationship between the Italian media and the fans and Ferrari. So to keep on the good side, I think, is important, right? It's because Ferrari means much more than a racing team to an Italian.
It's not a racing team. It's a part of Italy. We can argue on our soccer team, but we will never argue about the Italian national soccer team or the Ferrari racing team. It's above everything. Even if you are an Italian race car driver and you are amazingly successful, but you are not racing with Ferrari, the day that you are wheel to wheel against a Ferrari, the Italian crowd will cheer for Ferrari, forgetting you a little bit.
I love that. That was the passion that you could see. And of course, my father, he raced for them in 1970, as you know. And he says the same as Lewis was anticipating. If you get the chance to wear the red race suit, your life as a racing driver is complete. He won all those races and championships for Porsche, but Ferrari and Enzo, that was the most special time of his life. So I get it. It's really good. Well, let's talk about the race, Massimo. I was very excited for the start of the race, the way, it lined up. And, obviously Max was exceptional on his pole position. But the way that first few corners went, and Charles got past Oscar and then passed him back on the outside of the Lesmo, I couldn't even write my notes. I just was watching. What about you? I mean, and what about the crowd? Could you hear them? I imagine they just erupted.
It was probably the most beautiful Formula One moment in the whole season so far. That was so Steven Moss would say that was racing 10-10, and you can really feel it. And you were seeing the cars finally sliding, drifting on the corners a little bit, really going wheels to wheels. That was the moment where physics was an unknown art to many, and because they were not aware, they were able of keeping the car on the track. And I would say that for the first 3 laps, we really saw a kind of Formula One that we dreamt since. We are dreaming every day. This is the Formula One that we will love to see every single lap. You see really the skill of the driver, car put to the limit, if not well above the limit. And, everybody was trying to keep the position, forgetting about the perfect trajectory, or was looking for finding a small space where to try to put the car in. It was absolutely magic. And, you had the Ferrari doing well. And if you were looking at the video, you were seeing when the car were passing by, there was this sort of wave of red tifosi following it. It was absolutely magic. And on the track, you can hear the noise of the people. It was stunning.
I think you're right. Those first 3 laps also reflected the lack of strategic options, right, for the teams. There was a level of aggression that you could see the drivers knew they had to make their moves in those opening few laps. And of course, it's such a fast track. And the bravery of the drivers. I mean, when Max, was told to give the position back to Lando, he obviously did that going into turn 1. And, he passed Lando again into turn 1 a couple of laps later. Meanwhile, Lewis is getting up to 7th place. I was just thinking to myself, at this point, I don't know if you could say who was going to win the race, right? It was so early on. I'm thinking everybody's running so fast. What were you thinking?
Totally agree with you. There was no way, because at that moment, everything could happen. Could happen the greatest crash in the history, or could happen that you lose the car and you just spoon and you go on gravel and you're out. We all remember Mika Hakkinen passing somebody that was overlapped and just lost the car and ended up on the curb and was not able of keeping on racing. So it always happen. And in that moment, there was so much adrenaline, so much tension that you were really able of feeling it. And I would say that was refreshing to look that Formula One was still like this. And again, I think that the drivers, and at this moment I'm talking about both Leclerc and Hamilton, they prove that if they are given even the smallest chance to be there, they put what they have to be and to stay there. Because, have you seen how Leclerc car was so unloaded in wings? So of course it was very fast and straight, and the test in Monza is very precious. But the moment that it was braking, the car was really moving everywhere. It means that it was really on. In Italy, we say on eggs. Every centimeter was at risk.
Yeah.
And honestly, to see somebody driving in this condition, wow, that means that it was really something. James Hunt won't define something like this big balls. I don't know if I can say it now, but that was absolutely my zone. And he was there, and he did it, and he was, I think, putting his heart to cover the missing performance of the car. And of course, he slowed down when the team told him to do it, because again, the rear tires were overheating. There was no way he could go on like this for other 4 laps without ripping the tires.
Yeah,
no way.
Where were you watching the race from? Where were you, in the press room?
I was on the straight line above the pit lane.
Okay. So you could see it all happening.
Their bigger screen.
Yeah, bigger screen. On about lap 8, I think it was, Piastri overtook Charles into turn 1 very decisively. I think, as you said, you could see how much the Ferrari moved around under braking. I'm sure there was the opposite reaction from the Ferrari crowd at that point, but talk about what Ferrari fans do when they see great driving. Do they also appreciate that when they watch Lando and Oscar and Max? I know they want Ferrari to do well, but do they respect other drivers, other teams when they do something good?
Absolutely, yes. Indeed, if you notice at the end, everybody was singing for Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
Even because he didn't beat a Ferrari. Let's try to imagine Max first, Leclerc second, maybe a 1 second of distance. That would be different. But in this way, there was no game in a certain way of saying. So, why not? And he was there. He did an amazing race. And indeed, if you look, I think that he finished 19 seconds ahead of the second. Yeah. And if you go from the second to the 6th, you don't have 19 seconds in gaps. So it proved that he's an amazing driver and he has an airplane. All the other from 2nd to 6th were really fighting hard in 17 seconds. And that proved how important it is. But to answer your question, definitely yes. Italian supporters are very correct. They love Ferrari. But if you are a great driver and you drive in a certain way, they really appreciate you. Look at what happened with Senna. When there was Ayrton Senna, never raced for an Italian team, and was one of the fierce enemy in a certain way. But what he did, and even Nigel Mansell, well before him driving for Ferrari, he was called the Lion, and he was much loved because of his temperamental driving. Let's say.
Yeah. Well, I thought. This is no apologies to our fans. This is a very Ferrari-centric show, obviously. But I thought Charles pushing to stay ahead of George Russell, it was really beautiful driving. It was accurate. It was efficient. He defended incredibly well. When you were watching him drive in that, having to use his mirrors, yet drive on the edge, as you say, so perfectly, and stay in the race. What is your feeling when you watch Charles race like that? How does that reflect his position at Ferrari?
If you look at the history of the career of Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, you see that when they were the younger guys racing outside Formula One, there were of a very similar speed. And I believe that if they could be put side by side in a similar performance car, they will get similar results. That is my feeling. So to see him driving like this was not a surprise. I was really appreciating that, beside knowing that there was no way for him to get to win or to finish fighting for the victory, he did put everything he had to do well. And probably is because he's doing it everywhere, and probably put a little bit more just because he was in Monza.
Yeah. No,
But
I agree.
you immediately saw when he lost, after the first 6 laps, he lost his position, how Piastri flew away. So it was such a faster car. It did really miracles to keep him behind for so many laps.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what was going on at the front there. Obviously, Max just checks out, which had to have been very difficult for Lando and Oscar to deal with, because I think they know his car's got quicker, but arguably they're in the quicker car. And on lap 17, Lando actually did the first lap. He ran quicker than Max, but Max responded immediately. You know what that does to the psychology of the driver and the pit wall. They go, oh, the guy's still got pace. How do you think McLaren's psychology in this race, having come off such a strong string of races, how do you think they were approaching this moment in the race? Because a win wasn't looking that likely, really.
You know, in this Formula One season, or you are driving a Red Bull, or you have you need to have a very strong character and finding motivation inside yourself for trying to get that car that is running away like a rabbit in the dog races. I think that McLaren was aware of the fact that if nothing weird or unusual would have happened, there was no way for them to stay in front of the Red Bull. But of course, as you perfectly say, there are psychological sides when you are racing that send you strong messages. Maybe you are already there on the verge, risking everything you have, stressing brakes, transmission, tires, risking every single corner, and you make a time that you think, okay, I cannot put an extra cent of a second lower than this, and you have the other one that just to show that it could be faster, put half a second lower. So you say, okay, there is no game, and at this point, you just go fast, but you go at 99%, not a 101%. You don't take not meaningful risk at this point. It's logic, and this is correct, because you never know what could happen. It could be a flat tire, there could be a safety car entering, there could be a mistake. Seldom happens, but there could be. So you have the full right to stay there, keep your second position, looking in front of you, knowing that you cannot cover these 19 seconds. There is no way, and you do your race.
Yeah. Well, I know we got to the middle of the. Yeah, if you're smart. Yeah, I mean, I think they are. You think of the number of analysts and strategy and simulations. They have someone on the sim driving at the same time, I think, at the factory to come up with options. And I think it's pretty obvious when Max can just keep hammering down the laps, and fastest lap, time after time. And meanwhile, obviously, we'll talk about it in a minute. You've got the McLaren battle for the Drivers' Championship, and they're jockeying for position. But on lap 34, Leclerc pits to cover off Russell, and Jolyon Palmer, who we listen to on the F1 TV, he actually had a great point talking about the drivers. They're doing over 200 miles an hour there. It's huge risk, this type of racing. And the team are still talking, almost negotiating with the driver in that battle environment. And it's always interesting to me that despite all the resources they have, the driver still has such an input but from behind the wheel. And yet with Ferrari, I definitely think under Fred Vasseur, we're seeing a clearer communication, allowing Charles and Lewis to contribute more. Would you say that's accurate, that under Fred, the communications is better? And why do they rely on the driver so much?
Because still today, we know that at the very end in Formula One, the human factor is amazingly important. I could be driving Max Verstappen Red Bull, and probably I will struggle to qualify if I'm lucky and very good. So the mix between the car and the driver could change. Maybe now car is more important than drivers, definitely. But the feeling, the perception, the brain of the driver that is so much pumped in that moment. So his senses are completely active. They cannot be replaced by any computer, by any simulation, by any ghost driver driving the same race with the same setting in a simulator at home. And again, even for the whole team, meaning being there, being supportive, but they cannot take decision without listening to the input given by the driver. First, because will not be correct. But second, because they are all very aware that from the car, from inside the car, is it where really you have the right information coming to you.
Yeah. And would you agree that Fred Vasseur has cleaned up that communication? You remember Ferrari 2 years ago, they couldn't make the right decision. You must have been going crazy. You're just like, what? You're pitting? You're putting those tires on it? I mean, you almost were screaming at the television. And now they seem to have become less Italian in this moment.
But, that is a very difficult question to answer. Because I think that playing with strategy is probably the most difficult art that you have to develop in Formula One. Because, of course, it's fundamental. But I believe that if 70% of the time is the brain winning, 30% of the time is even a little bit of luck. And I have to say that the Ferrari team was not always perfect in this. Sometimes was even not very good, but sometimes they simply have been very unlucky. And you have to put this on the table too. But I would say that to be more prepared, to be more focused, to do better homework, to be maybe practicing a little bit more on this, taking fast decisions based on not the information, but 70% of the information, is even a question of habitude. And, if more you do it, better in a certain way you become. And then never forget that probably Italians are less perfect in managing the everyday and the ordinary, but probably are among the best in managing the emergency situation. So, I would say that in Monza, they didn't make mistakes. I say that we're very good in strategy and they were very good in what they had. Other times they've been less lucky. Sometimes other times they've been less good. But it's happened to everybody. But, it could even happen to Red Bull and his engineer. But when you have a car that is able to put in 20 seconds to the second one in Monza without taking any risk, it means that you have half a lap of margin to make a mistake without anybody noticing from outside.
It's like
it's
life.
A good benefit.
Yeah. It's like anything in life. When you're under pressure, your decisions are harder. You make not always the right decision. Well, let's talk about the moment when obviously Max came in about lap 38. You could tell he was going to run. Obviously, he knew he had to run to the end, just one stop. McLaren's were staying out with the only opportunity they had for a win of having a safety car. And of course, it almost did. It almost happened when obviously the two cars spun into the chicane. And I thought it was interesting. Obviously, Piastri comes in ahead of Lando. There's a discussion on the radio whether it's going to affect whether he's going for an undercut against him. Oscar has a 1.9 stop. Lando comes in and has the worst stop you can imagine, 5.9 seconds. It is a disaster at that moment for Lando, and obviously he's been running ahead. The consequences are immediate. It means that the championship lead is going to contract instead of expand for Oscar. The other way around. It's going to expand instead of contract. And I think Max knows he's going to cruise to the end. And then you have the moment when Oscar is told to give Lando the position back. And I, at first, was really agreeing with David Coulthard and Jolyon Palmer. I was like, it just doesn't feel good. That just, as a racer, that's just so weird to do that in the middle of the race, even though they have Papaya Rules. And obviously, I've had time to think about it. We'll get to that in a minute. What are your thoughts on that? What was your immediate reaction and the vibe in the media room, in the press room, when that radio message instruction came across?
Every time something like this happen, your heart sank a little bit, because you know that is, let's say, smart politics, but it's taking away from pure racing. And you've been a racer, a successful one, and you know when something like this happen, and you have to benefit, or you have to, you get penalized from this, doesn't matter. Your feeling is always a little bit of a bitter taste, because doesn't matter what, you know that there was something wrong happening. A mistake in the pit line could happen, and is part of the game. But on the other side, it's important for a team, for many reasons, to do their best to win, even if this is stretching a little bit too far the concept of sportsmanship.
I mean, imagine at the end of the year if Oscar loses the championship by 3 points. That's the kind of thing we're getting up to right now. If they were this close, imagine if it tightens up, because Lando, I think, is in an interesting position now. He's liberated a little from the pressure of leading he's not leading the championship. So he has one option, and that is to win as often as he can. And I think this story isn't going to end. It's going to go all the way to the finish line of the last race.
You can never read the future. In 1984, there was one of the most rainy Monaco Grand Prix ever. And there was an amazing driver like Alain Prost leading with his McLaren. And there was this young guy coming from nowhere with a Toleman heart that a few months before was struggling to qualify, that was dancing in the rain and was... I think eating 2 seconds a lap in a flooded Monte Carlo circuit. So, and the McLaren was pushing. Jack Hicks, I think, was the director of the race, to stop the race because of the risk of raining. And of course, Prost would have been supporting of that because he was losing the race. And indeed, the moment that the race reached half, so they was able of finishing the race and assign half a point after the score to every driver. They stopped the race, red flag, no more racing, Senna second, Prost first, and the McLaren team felt very, very smart. Then at the end of the season, Prost lost the championship for half a point. He would have finished second after Senna, he would get 6 points instead of 4.5. So he would have been a world champion. You never know. They play at that moment. They believe that is the right solution. Maybe yes, maybe no. We will know it in December when we will be in Abu Dhabi.
I guess you're right. I think it's going to be very exciting between now and then. There's so much debate about that, and I think Andrea Stella, he had some good words about it. He explained it, whether or not you like it. But I was just getting a lot of insight as well into Max's bandwidth, if you understand me, the capacity he has, as you say, in a car that can win by 20 seconds. And at the speed he was going, he still had enough bandwidth, enough room in his mental capacity to watch the screen. He saw, he laughed when he said, what? He let him by because of a pit lane. I mean, he was enjoying the moment. And I think seeing how silly it was, but I also thought it was funny when they said, Max, no risk. And his response was no risk, but full push. That explains what Max Verstappen is, right? Because full push all the time.
Yes, totally agree with you. But I believe that he said full push. That probably was for him 9/10.
Okay.
Because I believe that if he really should go faster because he has somebody on his back, he could have done something more.
Yeah.
Full push in that moment was, I don't want to make a mistake because I'm watching too much television, let's say, too much the screen outside. But he's not taking any risk. He's not disrespecting the mechanics. He's not stressing the tires. He's, let's say, he's a very fast speed without being in any way risky.
Yeah.
So when he has to fight with somebody wheel to wheel, then you take different risk. Then you can make a mistake. For him, that was something that was probably, as I say, 9/10 of his maximum capacity.
Well, we get to the end of the race. Max wins. Lando, great second place. Psychologically important for him, I believe. Oscar, then Charles Leclerc, then George Russell, and then Lewis Hamilton from 10th to 6th. 2 Ferraris in the top 6. I mean, that must, in a way, considering the circumstances, count as a win at this point of the series, to have 2 cars in the top 6. What was the emotion as an Italian seeing that result?
Let's say in this way, considering the average results of Ferrari this year, Monza was a good Grand Prix. To say that to finish in this positioning was like winning, probably not. It's a little bit too stretch, but was enough to have the people cheering simply because they saw a very beautiful race. That is important. They saw a lot of very beautiful drivers driving well and doing racing things. Not only, a train very boring for 50 laps. And the fact that Hamilton did a wonderful race, even if it was very little time in television, but he did an amazing race. He did really every single lap for him as being a sort of challenge and test. And I think that he did amazingly well considering what he had under his bottom. I would say that that was definitely good. But I would say that to see these final results in Monza without a Ferrari on podium, they are lucky that when they go back to Maranello, there is not all the Enzo Ferrari waiting for them.
I agree. Okay, next race is Azerbaijan. I never find that easy to say, Azerbaijan. Grand Prix. Can they get redemption there? Is the car going to be good on the twisty streets of Baku?
Baku is very dusty. The tarmac is very dusty. So cars tend to slide a lot. You have walls on your side, so you have very little space for mistakes. That Monza allowed you a little bit more because you have a little bit more space outside if you get too long on brakes or you slide too much. So I don't know, could be everything. But again, if nothing weird happen, what we saw in Monza will be what we will see in Baku.
Yeah. before I let you go, one word answer. Will it be Oscar or Lando at the end of the year, do you think?
That is a good question. I don't know.
No.
Really have no idea. And I think that my word could worth yours and everybody else. I would say Oscar, simply because probably the team believe that a little bit more that he could be the one. So, and that could make the difference. But beside for this, honestly, I have no instruments to tell you, oh, this will be the one winning. They are very good. They're both very good indeed. They are very close in performance. They drive very well. I think that they take out, if not 100%, 98% of their car both. So they are really on the same position. Probably the team supports a little bit more one than the other.
Okay. Well, Massimo, thank you so much for taking the time at such short notice. Let's do it again. Are you going to come to Vegas?
I don't think so, because, as I said before, I have a magazine to run, and I have a quite schedule to respect. But Justin, has been a really privilege to have this chat with you and with all your listeners.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Thank you, my friend. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Have a
Ciao.
wonderful day.
Well, it's that time of year again to get your plans in order to attend the 2025 Concours right here at the Wynn Las Vegas. This year's event is a weekend-long celebration that promises to be the social event of the full season, where the world's most prestigious cars and top automakers will grace the greens of the Wynn Golf Club for the 2025 Concours at Wynn Las Vegas. The fourth annual gathering features an expanded showcase of more than 250 unique cars within 4 judged and non-judged categories for vehicle entry and display. The event will take place from October 31st through November 2nd. For more information regarding tickets and room packages, you can visit lasvegasconcours.com. That's lasvegasconcours.com. Well, thank you very much to Massimo for joining us. Great insight, and of course, all about Ferrari, as I predicted. Next race, Azerbaijan F1. It's been racing on the streets of Baku since 2017, and I love the visuals of this track. It is a street race, has an incredibly long straight along the shoreline, but also with some width there. 3 cars can try and make their way into turn 1, but then it all narrows down through a medieval city. It's just a striking visual, the sight of a modern-day Formula 1 car, which are huge, by the way, on a street that used to have horses and carts, literally through that archway. It's quite amazing. Mistakes are punished severely, so you have to drive within yourself. But that's an oxymoron when it comes to Formula 1 cars, right? Because the drivers have to be on the edge of performance every single second, because if you're not, the other guy will. And last year, it was just brilliant race for Oscar Piastri in what was a clinically tough race for him against Charles Leclerc, who did get second. Lando, he was out in Q1, and I thought that was just game over for him, and everyone's like, that he can't overtake on this track. But you know what? Came all the way to 4th. So it was an insight into the form that McLaren really were hitting their stride this time last year, and obviously set them up for what they're doing this year in 2025. So I guess the question is, what will be different about this year? And I think we just heard Massimo said he doesn't really expect Ferrari, even he doesn't expect Ferrari to be right at the front. But you never know, because a street circuit does bring out something in each driver that even overrides what the car can do. And if you have confidence in your car, I know it firsthand, if you know where the car's going to be when you turn into the corner, you know where it's going to be when it exits, you can be very brave and very fast. And I think that Max is happier with his car. I think he's feeling a lot more bullish about what he can do in it, and maybe he'll be even good on a tight track. But as I said, it's really not an issue of Max winning. It's who he'll be taking points away from as we go through each of these critical last few races. So I think for McLaren, it will be an all-in shootout for qualifying. That is the race we're going to have to watch. Whereas for Max, he can overtake it in the race. But for Lando and Oscar, it kicks in their Papaya Rules. Again, we're not really privy to all of them, but it keeps being referenced. Whoever qualifies on pole does have sort of right of first refusal to undercut, to overcut, to make the right pit stop decisions, and hopefully we don't have to see any of a repeat of what we had in the last race, because that would be a pity. So I just think qualifying will be the thing to watch, and then we'll see the race unfold with all that brings. So my prediction, finger in the air without really being too scientific, it's going to be Lando, Max, and Oscar when the checkered flag falls on the Sunday. Tell me what you think. I'm always wrong about this, but I think I'm right on this one. So a huge thank you to Massimo for joining the show, and to the Wynn Las Vegas, and of course to SiriusXM. Check us out over there, and I will see you very soon.